Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Has Belgium ever had such global support? They beat the US pretty easily in the end. Charles de Ketelaere with 2 in the first half. And then Matt Freese froze and Tim Ream had a Tim Ream. And then Lukaku doing what he does in a Belgium shirt. And then they all did the Trump dance. It feels like justice after the game was completely overshadowed by the US president claiming credit for Flo Balogun's inclusion. Something denied by Gianni Infantino. Chinny Recon. But what a shame for genuine US football fans who saw their side get to this stage on merit, whose team until now had impressed the world and who are so desperate for this sport to grow. They deserve better. In the early game, Spain beat Portugal 1-0, Mikel Merino's injury time winner. Sid Lowe's managed to do 7 interesting minutes on it. It's no major tournament semi-final since 2016 for Portugal. Could they have, set up slightly differently? Nick Ames was at the Azteca, so we can talk about that last night. Good news for Barry. And the amazing content we hadn't seen, pubs watching Pointless, fans sleeping through it all, and the Mexican manager, Gordon, fuck you, ha 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 ha. All that, plus your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Archie Rintuck, welcome.
Hey, Max.
Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hello.
And in Mexico City, Nick Ames. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
Let's begin then with the USA 1, Belgium 4. I think the official Belgium team account posted "overturn this" with a picture of them celebrating. A good tweet from Franklin Leonard saying, "Get your Belgian chocolate now before the tariffs hit." 4-1 to Belgium then, the game to be replayed next Wednesday. But a really comprehensive victory for Belgium, Baz. They were better all over the park. And maybe this was the first really good team that they played. Or maybe all the off-the-pitch stuff affected them.
Well, I was surprised by how bad the USA were in this game. They never really got going at all. Were second best in every department. Their defence was a shambles, particularly in the first half, but no, all throughout. They conceded 4 very avoidable goals, I would say, and probably should have conceded a few more. And the way Belgium, you shouldn't need additional motivation in a World Cup to play well, but Belgium's motivation has been questioned before today. But the way they tore into the States from the kickoff suggests they maybe had a point to prove and had revenge on their mind after events of the last couple of days. And it's hard to know how good Belgium were because the United States were so bad. And the goal they scored came very much against the run of play and was a little bit lucky because Malik Tillman's free kick took a big deflection. Cakewalk for Belgium. And the thing is, I think a lot of people who wouldn't have had any great animus towards the United States before yesterday or the day before will be absolutely delighted to see them out.
Yeah, Gianni keeps saying football unites the world, and it did feel united. We should do some Belgium, Archie. I look de Ketelaere, who's an interesting player. I've always really liked him. Kind of got a languid, not very fast, technically good player, and it's a really lovely day for him.
He's never really fulfilled the potential that I think many saw when he left Club Brugge for AC Milan. Mm-hmm. Didn't score a goal for them in Serie A there and hasn't scored many for Atalanta since he moved on after that. And you talk about his languid qualities. I've been hearing about how when he was younger, he actually got made to play at centre-back at one point.
Oh, I could see him as a nice centre-back.
In what sense?
Just, I like a languid centre-back, good on the ball, a ball-playing, the John Stones of Belgium.
Sure. Okay.
Are you with me? You don't sound it.
There's something about the way he carries himself that doesn't scream centre-back.
No, it doesn't.
To me. But then again, we are used to growing up with Dan Burns, but we'll get on to him at another point. But it was just the way that, I don't know, the way he seemed to shut his eyes actually when he had that header for the second goal.
Yeah, Dan Burns not shutting his eyes.
I would point to the fact that including de Ketelaere was a big decision for Rudy Garcia as well. And Belgium and Rudy Garcia in particular were helped by this whole sideshow. Well, it wasn't the sideshow, it was the main show in the end with everything that was going on with Flo and Balogun, because they'd not played well in any of their 4 games so far. You could say the game against New Zealand, but given how New Zealand performed at the tournament, how much value can you attach to that? And you look at the decisions that Rudy Garcia had to make in this game. He left Kevin De Bruyne on the bench. He leaves Jeremy Doku on the bench. He brings in Nicola Raskin and Dodi Lukebakio, who were both excellent as well. It was, and even playing Timothy Castagna over Thomas Meunier, who has been good so far in this tournament, or a bright spark. Of the quarterfinalists we now have, Belgium, despite having played 5 games, remain the most mysterious, because I still don't think we can work out how good this team is despite the body of evidence.
Can you uncover the mystery, Nick?
No, I think we saw good evidence of their depth today, as we just pointed out, and that was very encouraging. I think they came up against a US team that just was not at it at all. And if I can shift it to the US slightly, you've got to be, if you're the US players or Pochettino or a lot of their fans, maybe not all but a lot, you've got to be asking, was it worth it, this Balogun farce? He's obviously a very good striker. He's had a good season, very talented. But he's not a world beater. He's not a superstar. You've got a good team of decent, mainly pretty good players that were functioning well in the tournament without him. And then for this sideshow to take over, which, let's be quite honest, was all about the ego of one man and his administration, who are very used to getting whatever they want and to steaming in and getting their way, and supplemented with that the cravenness of a global governing body, FIFA, and its president, who are used to both rolling over for this guy, Donald Trump, and also, frankly, these days, for steaming in and getting their way. For these two things to come together and completely overshadow what should have been a good occasion, a joyous occasion maybe, for the host nation. If I was one of their players or staff, I'd be really angry about it. I'd be zooming out and seeing what has happened here. As it happens, I don't think they'd have won the game anyway. They lost a friendly 5-2 to Belgium not that long ago, so there's clearly a big difference between the sides, and we saw that today. But I just think the whole show of ego and bluster and bombast that clouded this entire game did the US no favours at all. It completely backfired, and it's going to have much wider ramifications, or it should have much wider ramifications too, for FIFA, Gianni Infantino, and football in general.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for Balogun, Barry, because, I mean, he did nothing in this game virtually. He had no service.
Yeah.
But to be suddenly caught in the middle, he actually dealt with that red card really well. You know, the way he acted on the pitch, afterwards, what he said about it, and then to be in the middle of this political storm is just... It's just not fair on him.
It's not fair on him, and his name is going to become a byword for what happened here. It's the Balogun affair, the Balogun incident, the Balogun palaver, whatever. And to be fair, the USA, as far as we know, didn't agitate to have his ban suspended. It just happened, outside their bubble, and Poch, his statement left a lot to be desired, I think. But once they were thrown this bone, they picked it up. And I do think, I've been pilloried for saying this by some American fans, that they should have left him out and just not played him. And he did play. It must have affected him. As you say, he didn't get much service. He didn't play well. None of the American team played well. I mean, I can't think of a single one of them who had a good game. But we can't quantify, or we can only speculate as to how much of an effect this farce had on them. But it's got to have affected them in some way.
I would say I think the chance of any side leaving out their best centre forward, if he's available for whatever reason, morally correct or not, I don't know if any team would. I understand your point completely.
Yeah, it's not even a moral thing. It's more because this thing is going to be talked about for a long, long time, and if he doesn't play, at least the team can say, "Well, we were in no way complicit with this."
I totally understand. I just wonder if Kane gets a red and it's overturned spuriously or whatever.
Kane's a different story. Kane's Kane.
Yeah, I understand.
Balogun's Balogun.
No, I understand that. Archie?
Just on the football side of things and where the US lost this game, the panic with which they started the match and how their midfield did not turn up in anywhere near the same form that it has so far. I add to that the struggle to get Christian Pulisic on the ball. Shame for Amadou Onana that he looks to have picked up a pretty serious injury, judging by the knee brace that he's got there. And the way that Christian Pulisic was having to come back deeper into midfield seemed to disrupt the US flow a bit. They didn't seem comfortable with the way that they've been rotating off the ball. You can't also concede 61 seconds after you've scored your equaliser through Malik Tillman and you have the gift of a deflected goal. And the way that none of the players go towards the second ball when it's up in the air, I think that was the problem for the first two goals. And
the third is not great defending.
The third produced quite a chuckle from you.
It did, yeah.
Tim Ream was not a languid centre-half at that moment.
He certainly wasn't. Nick?
If I can, just go to the non-football side again very quickly, although it is all about football. This episode shouldn't be forgotten, and it could easily be whitewashed now and wiped under the carpet because the US didn't win, Balogun didn't score, nothing to see here. But the fact is that we've seen not even a failure process, we've seen a trampling over and a brushing aside, riding roughshod of process here that could, on another day, have influenced the biggest football tournament, the biggest sports tournament in the world. I mean, Balogun had a decent second half chance that he didn't score, didn't he? It could have been different. So the important thing is that this is now not forgotten. And I think it was very, very key, interesting today that, we saw Trump basically dump Infantino in it by saying, I called him. And what was interesting after that was that FIFA, that normally you to get a reply out of them, a substantive reply about a controversial topic, it's like blood from a stone. And there they were churning out the explanations from Infantino, a very wordy screed later from a disciplinary commission, I think it was. They knew they were on the rack here. And they know they're still on the rack. And the fury that I was hearing from contacts all over football, various ends of the scale, was very, very real. But there is always a danger, especially these days when we're so dopamine hit that we move on to the next story and the next scandal and the next sugar rush and everything, that it just gets forgotten and becomes another silly soap opera thing that happened. That cannot happen here. This was really serious. And I think it is a bit of a bullet dodge maybe that the US didn't win, frankly. I think it's a very good thing for football, unfortunately. Sorry, US fans, that they didn't. But we can't let this be forgotten.
In an uncharacteristically rambling speech, Trump did say that he had personally asked Gianni to review the red card. Gianni then said, FIFA's judicial bodies are independent. They operate autonomously. Belgium were given a very small window to appeal. Trump did also say, the ref was dodgy. I've seen this ref before. He's very suspect. So on the ref, FIFA and the referees committee had to do a statement on Rafael Klaus saying FIFA recognised this guy as one of the world's leading professional referees and a valued member of Team 1 at the FIFA World Cup. France have appealed to FIFA over Elise's yellow card. It's been reported the FA are considering an appeal against the Kwanzaa red. Perhaps don't bother, lads, is what I would say. And a really important point, I sort of mentioned it in the intro, but we've spent a lot of time, with the Guardian US soccer guys, Alex and Pablo and Jeff, and there are so many US football fans who listen to this podcast and have for years and years and years, who love the game and want it to grow in this country and had probably got carried away with, those 4 wins and the US playing well. But there was so much goodwill towards this team. I think if this hasn't happened, I think as neutrals we're probably supporting the US against Belgium and hoping that they went through. I don't know. And they must be so pissed off.
Yeah.
That this is, they are, the desperation to grow this game and to get respect for football in this country and around the world for US soccer. They must be so pissed.
I'd say they're really angry and probably a bit embarrassed. I remember when, after the Thierry Henry handball, the FAI, Football Association of Ireland, tried to lobby, I think it was Sepp Blatter at the time, to give Ireland a spot
God, what
the
we do
world.
for Sepp now. Anyway,
Yeah, oh, come back, Sepp. All this forgiven. To give Ireland, because we'd been cheated out of this place, and give us a pity spot at the finals. It was toe-curlingly embarrassing and made me angry. And I certainly wasn't alone in being embarrassed and angered. That would have been on John Delaney's watch. Yeah, dyed-in-the-wool USA fans will have found this whole thing very distasteful. There are a lot of USA fans who only started watching soccer 3.5 weeks ago, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's fine, everyone's welcome. But I think a lot of them thought Balogun deserved his reprieve.
Well, a lot of journalists and pundits have been doing the mental gymnastics to say this is great for football, and that has been pretty frustrating, if unsurprising. Archie?
Just also feel a bit for the players.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't have really done anything about this. And if they do speak out against it, then they're putting their peace and their family's peace on the line. I think I also feel a bit, most of all, because of Fulham connections, I also feel very sorry for Tim Ream, especially on the mistake.
Yeah.
But I also just know and think that he's a really good bloke.
Yeah.
And
he probably hated this.
Yeah, exactly. But what can you do as the captain of this team? Well, of course, you could make a very strong political statement, but in this climate,
Yeah.
it's
very easy to sit here and say this is what someone should do, and I agree. When if you're on the cold face of it, not as easy. Anyway, that'll do for part one. Part two, we'll do Spain's win over Portugal. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Spain beat Portugal 1-0 to set up that game with Belgium. Mikel Merino's injury time winner. I caught up with Sid Lowe at full time. Hey Sid, we're trying to make a podcast as interesting as after the England-Mexico game. So can you make this game sound better than it was for me?
It was amazing, Max. What a game. Should have been a final. Just glorious. Completely brilliant. Just fantastic. No, I mean, it had a brilliant end. And it had an end that had me desperately scrambling because I was literally going from 0 to 850 words in 7 minutes. That wasn't too easy. And a nice end as well because, of course, Mikel Merino, who'd only played 28 minutes since the end of January, who'd had an injury that first they couldn't diagnose it properly. They didn't know what it was. They were struggling to find an answer. In fact, he said that he was kind of almost relieved when he eventually got operated on because he didn't really know, and at least then he had a clear plan to go forward. And went a couple of months without being able to walk. His wife was pregnant at the time. He talks about how his wife, who's 6, 7, 8 months pregnant, trying to help him around the house, but it should be the other way around, trying to help him get up and down the stairs because he's on crutches, and he didn't think he would get here, as I say, just 28 minutes since the end of January. But Luis La Puente, and I remember seeing Luis La Puente in, when would it be, late February, I think, and asking him about Merino, and he was absolutely clear, even at that point, even if at that point he wasn't necessarily being offered the chance to say so publicly, he's absolutely clear that he would wait to the very, very end for Merino, because he was convinced that he was a player that was a bit different to some of the others, that could play in lots of positions, and had that amazing ability. The Spaniards always refer to it as llegada, which means arrival. That ability to arrive into the penalty area at the right time, to be a midfielder that gets into the box. And no one really does that for Spain, except possibly Fermin, who also got injured and couldn't come to this tournament. And so tonight was wonderful, this afternoon. And that celebration, which of course he repeated from Stuttgart, which was copied off his dad, who did it 33 years ago.
Yeah, and the pass from, the game wasn't fascinating, but the goal is beautiful, and the pass from Ferran Torres is so good.
Yeah, and I think there's another element to that which is important, which is that, the three players involved in the move, Merino, Fabian and Ferran Torres, all substitutes. Merino had only been on the pitch 6 minutes. I must confess, I'm not sure how long Ferran had been on, about 20 minutes, I think, and Fabian hadn't been on very long either. And I think in the case of Fabian, obviously, it's been quite difficult to deal with this because he's won 2 European Cup wins in a row with PSG, and then to find himself kind of out of place with the Spanish national team, I think was quite hard for him to deal with. He was a starter in the first game and hasn't played since. And I think for Ferran, I don't know if you saw this footage, Max, and I must confess, I now can't remember which game it is. I feel like it was the game against Saudi Arabia. And and Spain are obviously already going to win the game anyway. And Ferran has a goal which gets ruled out for offside. And the cameras catch him basically kind of with his fingers crossed going, please let it be a goal, please let it be a goal, please let it be a goal, please let it be a goal. And then there's a chance that he gets late in one of the next games, which was it maybe Uruguay? I'm not sure, where he hits the bar. And there was a sense, I think, of him feeling under pressure, him feeling like it wasn't quite going for him. So I think it's quite important for him as well to feel like he's played a part in this. And Luis de la Fuentes talked about the importance of trying to give opportunities to those players who haven't had them yet, to try and give people minutes, to try and make them all feel like participants. And I think that goal, apart from its obvious importance because it put Spain through, and of course that's the most important thing. And I'm not going to try and invent some big story around everything else, but I think there's a kind of a significance as well because of the role of three substitutes in making it happen.
There's an obligatory question about Ronaldo, Sid. I mean, that's his last ever game at a World Cup. You were there to see it. And listen, Portugal didn't do much, but he certainly didn't do a lot.
No, I think that's true. I've actually just been listening to him in the mix zone after the game, saying that although this is his last World Cup, it might not necessarily be his last game. Obviously, we don't know I don't know there if he's talking about club football or international football. I think it's club football. Obviously, he wants to continue. I would imagine he absolutely would, because I think he'll want to get to that 1,000-goal target. Although Roberto Martinez has always said, no, he's not obsessed by that. That's not a thing. That's a media thing. It's you that talk about it, not him. I think with the international team, of course, the decision almost certainly won't be in his hands. But he said post-game, now's not the time to make a decision, in the heat of the moment. There's time for me to talk to my family. There's time for me to think about what I want to do next and to whether I continue. But yes, it will be my last game of the World Cup. Obviously, it's maybe even, a World Cup later than he would have anticipated and anyone else would have anticipated, not least because when he walked out the World Cup last time, it felt like the manager had kind of set the wheels in motion for him not to come back, hadn't he? That hard decision had been made, and that actually Roberto Martinez could have turned up and not had to make it himself and just kind of carried on with the idea of Ronaldo not in the national team. But you're right, today he didn't really have an impact. I think in his defence, he scored 3 goals at this tournament. It's difficult to know what Portugal would have looked like, with a different forward up front. I think it's true, of course, that there isn't the press, that there's not maybe the velocity to the game that there might be with a different forward. And of course, Gonzalo Ramos came on and scored very quickly the other day. But I'm just reluctant to make an all-round performance in which they didn't create a huge amount about him, if you see what I mean. At times, a striker is both a cause but also a consequence of a way a team plays.
Yeah, and actually, if that's the case, then it is frustrating that Portugal's midfield should be so brilliant. And maybe, you feel like these are 2 of the best midfields in the tournament. They cancelled each other out a bit today, maybe.
Yeah, that was the focus before the game, this idea that these might not be the best 2 teams here, but they're certainly the best 2 midfields. I felt that there was a period in the first half where I thought this is shaping up to be really good, because it did feel like these were 2 teams that wanted the ball. These were 2 teams that wanted to go at each other. These were 2 teams that wanted to happen. I thought that Nuno Mendes was brilliant, and I did feel like the game died a little bit with his departure. Now, I don't know if I'm overstating that because I was so focused on him and Lamine and on that battle, but it did feel to me that was kind of the beginning of the end. And Semedo actually did an all right job of stopping Lamine Yamal. Lamine wasn't able to do a huge amount either, really, although there were 1 or 2 really nice moments. But you're right, the midfield, it did feel like they cancelled each other out. I don't know how it felt watching it for you, but I felt this was an unusually low-key performance from Pedri. I thought he gave the ball away a lot more than he usually does. I thought Rodri played very well, but I thought Pedri struggled to really influence the game. And I felt a little bit the same with Bruno Fernandes, although there were a couple of very nice passes from him. But yeah, a game that was set around those 2 midfields. I suppose, yeah, the conclusion maybe is the way you frame it, that it's not so much that those 2 midfields didn't play well, as that they were both up against really good midfields, and it's quite hard to do so, to play well when the other midfield is also really brilliant.
Did you trip Luis de la Fuente up the other day?
Yeah, I was really, I very nearly hurt him quite badly. And I'm quite glad that I didn't. Do you know that thing when you trip up and you have to sort of run to stay on your feet, otherwise you're going to fall? Yeah, I tripped him up and he did that. And he went running down this sort of mini slope by the pitch, and he kind of turned around and came back to me. I was like, oh my God, can you imagine the headlines? Not just journalist nearly kills Spain manager, but English journalist nearly kills Spain manager. I would have been the most hated person in the entire country if, Max, I am not already.
Was it a reducer? Like what we just a little ankle tap? Or were you going 2-footed?
It was a little narrow walkway, and it was a little ramp that went up to the pitch in Los Angeles. And I went to have a look at the pitch on match day -1, and Luis de la Fuente was out there looking at the pitch with his staff. And I thought, well, I probably shouldn't get in the way. So I stayed in the narrow walkway rather than going out to the pitch. So what that meant was that when he left the pitch and went down the narrow walkway, it was quite narrow. And without me realising it, my foot was sticking out a little bit. And he went straight over it.
That's what people say. He's not that kind of journalist. Like that.
Exactly.
He's not that kind of journalist. Anyway, thanks, Sid.
I got away.
Thanks for going on.
I got away with it, though, Max. I did get a red card, but a call from Donald Trump cleared me for the rest of the tournament.
Of course it did. Thank you, Sid.
Pleasure. Cheerio.
So Sid has basically covered Spain and all of it, actually.
I think I was overcome with fatigue today. I think it must have been
sadness,
the emotional and trauma of last night's match in Mexico. But I actually missed this game because I was asleep. And
but you didn't get out of bed till. What time did you get out of bed?
No, I got up and then I went back to bed. And I watched the Fox highlights package, which you won't believe was 15 minutes long.
Was it? Well done to them.
So I'm not really in a position to comment on it, but crikey, it was bad. And I don't know how a team like Portugal, well, I do know, but it shouldn't be happening, is playing like Everton under Roberto Martinez. A team with so many good players as Portugal have, how are they reduced to playing like Everton under Roberto Martinez? Are there any clues?
I mean, there was a great tweet, I don't know, some meme of someone smiling from nothing saying, Roberto Martinez, when he finds out his agent's got him the Netherlands gig, you can just see it happening. But, it feels like Chris Sutton on 5 Live was like, this is all about Ronaldo, Nick. And I don't know if you think it is. Sid was perhaps a bit more circumspect today. But what a waste of the rest of these players, right? This is 2016, the last time in a semi-final. They've got so many brilliant players.
Yeah, and you've got this fantastic midfield, all these technicians who can move the ball so well. These wingers, these wide men who are fast and tricky and devilish, and all of these players are crying out for movement in front of them, and people who can exploit space, and people who will make runs that free others up, and make the players around them better. But instead they've had this totem up there, and I think it's a point that many of us have been saying on this pod for years now, but it shows how absurd the problem has been. I mean, there was one moment, I think, in the second half today when Ronaldo sort of attempted a run down the left, I think, towards the penalty box, and sort of 15 years ago, it might end up in a goal. This time he travelled about 10 yards and just sort of stumbled and got dispossessed. You just it just didn't work. And I think it's not all about Ronaldo, but I think it largely is, because it's such an important part of the team, especially these days when it comes to pressing from the front and as I said, making runs that can basically allow your entire attack and midfield and attacking fullbacks to breathe. And Portugal have had none of that. And there was an opportunity to change it. The Qatar World Cup, when they put Gonzalo Ramos in for Ronaldo against Switzerland, he scored a hat-trick and they won 6-1. I was at that game, and you think, okay, this is the new dawn now. This is the new dawn. And it just hasn't happened, and ultimately they have paid for it. And Roberto Martinez, who I think would have gone anyway if they hadn't won the World Cup, which they were probably never going to, has paid for it in a way as well. And it is just a bit of a shame, because there's a lot of players there with fantastic vision, fantastic scope, and they have been lumbered by the all-time great. Let's be honest, we can't denigrate what Ronaldo has done over his career, but we can say that what he is offered now is not good enough.
A tweet from Duncan Alexander saying Cristiano Ronaldo's dream of scoring more World Cup knockout goals than Matthew Upson feels like it's over. Finally on this, Archie?
Nick made the point about that run that Cristiano Ronaldo did down the left. The thing that actually struck me most about that run was that no one followed him, as if to say that his teammates are going, well, we all know how this is going to end. And surely your teammates are going to follow your runs in hope.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake that Cristiano Ronaldo has made is continuing to play football for the last 5 years because of his quest. Quest is not a strong enough word. His ambition obsession. Thank you. To match Lionel Messi, when instead, had he retired earlier, I think we could consider his greatness in football in its own pantheon. And yet, the further he's gone on, the more it's just slipped away as Messi has become brilliant at the World Cup and won the World Cup with Argentina. And then you're left with this weak quote from Ronaldo today saying, well, me winning the Euros in 2016 when I think you came off in the first half anyway. Portugal won it, not just Ronaldo in that tournament, where he's saying that, look, that has to be considered in the same dimension as winning a World Cup. It's not. You're reaching. You need to stop. And the longer that he's gone on, and if he still goes on, who knows, the longer that he continues to tar his footballing legacy.
I don't disagree, Archie. And that'll do for part 2. Part 3, we can do a bit more How Was It at the Azteca with Nick. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Sorry to put you through this again, Barry.
It's all right.
Nick, you were at the Azteca yesterday. What a privilege to be there. And how was it?
Yeah, I was at, just in case Barry's forgotten my score after his long sleep, England's 3-2 win over Mexico at altitude against a team that hadn't lost at home since 2013 that put them in the World Cup quarter-finals. Now we got that detail out of the way. It was, I mean, a lot of words have been said already, so I can probably only add to them. I mean, I'm here in my hotel in Mexico City, 24 hours or so on, and you still feel a little bit drained almost. I was with, just before this pod, our good friend and colleague Dave Heitner from The Guardian and a couple of other colleagues too, having a spot of dinner who are still here, and we were all just looking at each other saying, we're knackered. And it was just a game of football that we went to last night. It was literally edge of the seat tense stuff for 101 minutes, wasn't it? And the atmosphere was everything that people say about the Azteca. It was intense. It was thrilling. It was a real roller coaster ride as well. But I think something about it all it's been really nice as well. It's been really jovial and genial. And the Mexicans, while they were so passionate and into their team, and while the noise in there when they scored their goals was utterly phenomenal, and I was at the Ecuador game in the round before on Tuesday, and the noise when they scored those goals was the loudest I've ever heard in a stadium in my life. It was astonishing. There was no doubt how partisan they were, but the moment they were mingling on the concourse with England fans or in the bars afterwards or before, I only saw and heard really lovely things, and just in terms of the hospitality and the way people got on. So it's all made for a really lovely occasion, actually, and obviously an all-time classic of a football match that I think has been covered in great depth already. But I think the England players would have enjoyed their day off today, and Thomas Tuchel said he wasn't gonna even engage with any football today, and I think they've earned that. And I think we'll all come away from Mexico City thinking this was a once in a lifetime moment to be able to do this. It's definitely being able to cover these two games at the Azteca against Ecuador and England. I think they've been the best things I've done in my career, quite honestly. Not the best work I've done, the best things I've done. It's just been absolutely magical. And I think it's a bit of a scandal, really, that Mexico doesn't get much further presence in this World Cup. I mean, we can talk about where the final should be. I think the Azteca should at least have a quarter-final or semi-final. But then maybe less is more. Maybe scarcity is good. Maybe it makes things that bit more magical and rare and joyful when you do experience them. But no, it's been honestly a lovely and quite overwhelming experience for a lot of us. And one of those things that is everything that it's cracked up to be. And obviously the result, Mexico 2, England 3, was also a very very pleasing one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm chuckling to myself listening to Nick in Mexico and comparing and contrasting, and Wilson in Mexico on day one of this odyssey, and how grumpy and miserable he was.
I mean, it is
because the Wi-Fi didn't work.
I mean, it is worth pointing out just some amazing stuff that when we recorded yesterday we hadn't seen, Archie. Like the schools who went in and hadn't seen this game and all watched it, teachers and kids, was really beautiful. The box part, I'm not a box part guy, but like double limbs is something. Seeing everybody go wild and just about get their breath back, and then Bellingham scores again. people in pubs waiting for the game in that hour delay and watching Pointless on silent and just going down, and when it's 1 they're like, oh, and when it's 0. There was an amazing clip of Harry Kane taking a penalty. Do you see this one? And 4 lads in a front room all asleep and not woken up, just there sleeping through this whole thing. And maybe the best is the Mexican coach, Javier Aguirre, just as Anthony Gordon's there going, Gordon, fuck you, and then bursting out laughing. And it's almost like it's animated. It's like a jump cut. It's like a bad edit, how quickly he starts laughing, like a sort of cartoon. I don't know. I saw this tweet on Dan Burns' header. The one with the Raul Jimenez overhead kick.
There's only one.
Well, no, he heads another one.
I know, but like...
He says, AJ, when you consider the following: shot power, shot trajectory, block proximity, Dan Burns skull thickness, low air resistance, this must be the furthest a ball has ever been headed in football history. I can't see how it's physically possible for it ever to be beaten. It's probably right. It's an unbelievable... I can't stop watching it. Adam Hurrey from Football Clichés tweeted out the BBC graphics of Dan Burns' headers. You know, this ludicrous
the 3D thing.
The 3D thing, it's amazing. John Stones in the dressing room pretending that he's injured his shoulder with Tuchel and then just starts dancing. I enjoyed that.
I liked your reaction last night after we'd had dinner, where you were like, I'm just going to go by the pool now, pour myself a glass of red and watch the final 20 minutes again.
I did. I watched Injury Time again. Absolutely brilliant. This tweet from Pete. I'm not saying sport is brutal, but Raul Jimenez's next competitive game is against Port Vale. I thought that's a blow. Jordan Henderson expected to have surgery on the wrist injury he suffered after he landed awkwardly after hopping over the advertising hoardings. Yeah, there was one, Archie, a friend of mine, Tom, from the Melbourne Bohemians, forwarded it to me. Jordan Henderson's night was more like a stag do. Dress up like a footballer, get a talking to by the authorities for your behaviour, and then break your arm jumping over some railings. Poor bloke. He wants to stay and be a vibes man, and he's been brilliant at that.
He can still throw a dart.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, of course he can. And Ellis James texted to say, on behalf of your Welsh, Irish and Scottish listeners, Barry has got to get Archie out of that sodding bedroom, the lucky bedroom. Look, we'll do tomorrow's games. Tomorrow, of course, Argentina, Egypt, Switzerland, Colombia. It is worth talking about the Egypt coach, Hossam Hassan, giving an impassioned 5-minute speech on Palestine and the injustice they're going through. That was his quote, and how whatever happens at the World Cup pales into comparison with how poorly the world has reacted to the situation. It got rapturous applause from the Egyptian journalists. We'll hopefully talk about that more tomorrow. Nick, you wrote a fascinating and depressing piece on one of FIFA's main sponsors, Aramco, which I would recommend everybody reads. But if you could briefly give us the background to that.
Sure, yeah. I was covering the earlier stages of the World Cup in Houston, Texas, and about 100 miles east of there is a city called Port Arthur, and it's an oil refinery town. There's these more than three, but three major refineries there, and one of them is run by a company called Motiva, that is a wholly owned subsidiary of Aramco. Now, you probably, or you may subconsciously know that Aramco, the Saudi state petroleum company, it gets pumped, I think, into your eyeballs every time you watch a World Cup game, because it's a major partner of FIFA, probably their biggest sponsor, I think. So they essentially own this massive plant, and in short, Port Arthur has an awfully bad cancer rate, like the highest in Texas, one of the highest in the US. Sky high rates of lung problems, heart problems, asthma, especially in children, all kinds of illnesses, and it's been like this for many years. And I mean, a lot of causal links can be made to leaks coming from the plants, which sometimes exceed what they're allowed to emit. So I went there basically to talk to local residents and find out how life is there. And the answer is, while there have been some improvements in recent years with compliance from the oil companies, it's still not very good. It was a very bleak place to go to, honestly. It was once thriving. You once had a bustling downtown with all kinds of famous acts like Aretha Franklin, people like that. playing there in years gone by, and now replaced with a shell. It was desolate, empty plots and buildings, a pretty poor community that was stuck in houses that were right along the fence line behind the refineries, where their property value was so low that you couldn't really or didn't really want to sell your house. Unemployment very high, people not really being given jobs by the oil companies, etc., etc. And it all came together to just paint a picture of what is happening in this town a couple of hours from where the World Cup has been going on, and where a major player in the tournament, a really major player, is heavily involved, even through a subsidiary. So I would say if you have 5 or 10 minutes, please do read the piece, because it's got a lot of testimonies really from local people that put it far better than I ever could, and you'll get a bit of an idea of the kind of deal that FIFA makes in order to in its eyes and some people's eyes further the cause of football and to fund its activity across the world.
It's brilliant reporting, Nick, and we'll put a link in the description page on the website, and everyone should go and read it, because it's really good what you've done there, Nick. A moderate gear change to finish the pod. Danny Murphy was on Spain-Portugal comms, so obviously he had a lot of time to fill, and there's the trilogy of Danny Murphy's cat. He said, "We did try and settle Bob back into the house." This was if you remember, he came back after jumping in the Royal Mail van. He was feral. They sent him to Preston. He said, "We did try and settle Bob back into the house, but he started bullying and fighting his sister Mary." I presume that is Bob's sister Mary, not Danny's sister Mary. I don't have those details. We made the decision to give him the red card and send him up to the road to Preston. I think it was the right decision. I did message Danny to say the trilogy, thank you, and he said, "Had to be done." Laughing, crying emoji. Fist emoji. So well done, Danny. Steve says, more Bob the Cat talk from Danny Murphy. We once met Danny Murphy while out in Chester with one of our friends who was also called Danny Murphy. Needless to say, the footballer version was not as interested in meeting our Danny Murphy as we had hoped. And I finished with this really lovely email from Paul, who says, "Dear Max, Barry and the good ones." All right, Paul. He says, long-time listener, first-time emailer. With England facing Norway in the finals, I can't keep it to myself anymore. Danny Murphy might have a Bob anecdote, but I have an Oscar one. First, you need to know something about me. 3 years ago, I was injured in a rock climbing accident. I broke my neck, and I've lost much of my bodily functioning. I need help with, well, pretty much everything, from a full-time care assistant. That includes going to the toilet. We'll come back to that. While Danny might have had a cat called Bob, my first pet was a guinea pig called Oscar. I loved him, but as he got older, he developed problems with constipation. The vet told me I had to put Vaseline on my finger and help the poo come out of his bum. I'm sorry to say that 9-year-old me was much less dutiful than I should have been, and I fear that Oscar suffered. Fast forward 30 years, and how the tables have turned. I don't suffer, but I sympathise far more with Oscar than I ever did when I was young. I've recently been volunteering at the Birmingham Sports Science Division, helping them do research on improving functionality for people with spinal cord injury. So at least I'm now a guinea pig in more ways than one. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humour, but if it fancies giving me a break, watching England win against Norway in a pub with my friends only a couple of years after I watched the European Championship final alone, convinced I'd never be happy again, well, that would be a good way to do it. Come on, England. Thank you, Paul. Keep on keeping on. We appreciate your email. And that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Paul. And despite your misfortune, I'm still hoping to get better.
Thank you, Barry, of course. But that'll do for today. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Max.
Cheers, Archie.
Rushton, thank you.
Cheers, Barry.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Rory Simon and Matt Bentley-Viney. Our executive producer is Joel Grove, and we'll be back tomorrow.